Echoes Across the Stars, The Last Hope, Sci-Fi audiobook. Chapter 1. The Catalyst. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale light into the dimly lit room. Zoe blinked as she peered at the display, trying to shake off the grogginess that still clung to her mind. She rubbed her eyes and checked the time. It was almost 2 a.m. She had been working on the project for months, but still didn't have any breakthroughs. Zoe had always been a bit of a lone wolf. She was more content to work on her own and stay out of the spotlight. But this time, she knew she needed help. Her team was counting on her to deliver a solution that would change the world. She couldn't let him down. Not after everything that had happened. Zoe had spent countless nights in her lab, trying to figure out the missing puzzle piece. She had tried every possible combination, but nothing seemed to work. She was close to giving up when something caught her eye. A small detail in one of the equations caught her attention. It was barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Zoe's heart raced as she realized what she found. It was a catalyst. The catalyst was the key to everything. It could change the world, but it could also destroy it. Zoe had to be careful. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She contacted her team and asked him to meet her at the lab. She wanted to show them what she had discovered. They arrived a few hours later, bleary-eyed and clearly exhausted. Zoe walked them through her findings and the importance of the catalyst. They listened intently, but their skepticism was palpable. "We've tried everything, Zoe. What makes you think this will be any different?" asked James, one of her colleagues. "I know it's risky, but we have to try. The potential rewards are too great to ignore," Zoe replied with conviction. They agreed to give it a shot. They worked tirelessly for days, tweaking the equations and fine-tuning every detail. The tension in the lab was tangible. No one knew what would happen. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. They activated the catalyst. The room shook as a brilliant light filled the lab. Zoe felt the rush of adrenaline as the room began to transform. The air crackled with energy, and she knew they had done it. But something wasn't right. Zoe could feel it in her bones. There was a disturbance in the air, like a storm about to break. Suddenly, the room went dark. Zoe felt a jolt of fear run down her spine. What had they done? Had they unleashed something they couldn't control? The silence was deafening as Zoe listened for any signs of life. Slowly, the lights flickered back on. But as Zoe looked around the room, she realized that something had changed. The lab was no longer the same place she had worked in for months. Zoe's world had just been turned upside down, and she had no idea what was going to happen next. Chapter 2. The journey begins. The lab was eerily silent, and Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She turned to her team, but they were already rushing towards the door. Panic etched their faces as they pushed and shoved to escape. Zoe carried a sense of determination deep within her gut, even though her mind battled fear with every step. Something had gone terribly wrong, and she knew she couldn't leave without answers. Without a second thought, she followed her team out of the lab, and into the unknown. The world outside was darker and colder than before. Zoe felt naked without the reassuring hum of the lab's technology around her. All around her, she saw destruction everywhere. Buildings twisted and melted into an unrecognizable mess. What the hell happened? James, one of Zoe's colleagues, asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Zoe just shrugged, pretending to be stronger than she actually was. She knew that the cataclysmic event they had experienced in the lab had caused the damage, but beyond that, she had no answers. The team regrouped and started to walk towards the city, Zoe leading the charge, hoping that they would get to the bottom of the situation. They passed through once familiar streets, which were now distorted and unrecognizable. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet ruins. After an hour of walking, the team came upon a shelter, which had been hastily put together using scavenged materials. They found a group of survivors inside, most of whom were struggling to come to grips with the reality of the situation. Zoe shared her insights with the survivors, explaining what the team had been doing in the lab when the world erupted. The survivors were skeptical at first, but soon they realized that the team was earnest. The team collected data from the survivors and studied the ruins of the city. They discovered that the event had not just affected their city but had ravaged much of the world. Their home was now an uninhabitable place. Zoe and her team knew they couldn't wait around, hoping for a solution to fall from the sky. They had to travel beyond their city, beyond their world, to find the answers they were searching for. They began to work on plans for the journey. They needed to gather supplies to brave the elements and find a ship to take them to the stars. Zoe was determined to complete the mission, no matter what dangers they may face. After several days of preparation, the team stood ready to leave the orbit of their world. Together, they had acclimated to the harsh reality and had found strength in one another. They vowed to stop at nothing to get the answers they needed. And so, Zoe and her team set out on an interstellar journey into the unknown. The only thing certain was that the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined, and their journey would be fraught with challenges they could not predict. Chapter 3: Betrayal. As Zoe and her team voyaged through space, the journey grew increasingly treacherous. At any moment, they could fall prey to the dangers lurking amongst the stars or the remaining civilizations scattered across the galaxy. Each day brought new challenges, and the team relied on their ingenuity and collective strength to see them through. The team had recently made an alliance with a group of aliens who promised to help the humans locate the technology they needed to complete their mission. Zoe was uncomfortable with the fact that they had trusted an unknown group, but she knew that they needed all the help they could get. Their meeting with the aliens was at the edge of an unnamed planet's asteroid belt. The aliens arrived, and they exchanged greetings. The aliens were a tall, silver-skinned species with 8 piercing blue eyes. They didn't appear aggressive, and the team was relieved. Zoe's translator module beeped, indicating that the aliens had a counterproposal. They would help the humans find the required technology, but in exchange, they wanted something that the humans had: the samples of the element that Zoe and her team had discovered in their lab. Zoe was taken aback. These samples were vital to her research, and she couldn't give away the only tangible evidence of her team's work. Zoe hesitated for a moment but then decided to accept the aliens' conditions. The samples were undoubtedly crucial to her team, but she would do whatever it took to achieve their goal. As Zoe handed over the samples, she noticed something strange occurring. The aliens' demeanor had changed, and their 8 eyes had darkened to an ominous shade of blue. Suddenly, around them, the aliens turned hostile. The atmosphere was charged with hostile intent. The ship system came alive with alerts and warnings. Zoe and her team drew their weapons, poised for the attack. Outnumbered and outgunned, Zoe and her team fought the aliens with all their might, trying to defend themselves as well as their ship. But it was too late. The aliens had already infiltrated their vessel. The aliens sabotaged their ship's comms and power, leaving the team stranded and helpless. Zoe realized that their naive trust had been a terrible mistake. She had traded the remnants of their research for a potential death sentence. She felt a surge of desperation. Even if they could get the samples back from the aliens, they'd never make it back to Earth without a working ship. But Zoe refused to give up hope. They could not let this be the end of their journey. They had come too far, risked too much, to let everything fall apart. They needed a way to take back control of the ship and survive the encounter with the aliens. They quickly formulated a plan to retake the ship. With some quick thinking, Zoe's team managed to turn the tables and outsmart the aliens. The team's fierce battle readiness had not gone in vain. They powered up the ship, and moments later, zoomed away from the aliens with a screeching blast. Zoe's team had narrowly escaped the treacherous aliens, but Zoe knew that they had to be more careful in the future. There was no room for naivety in the vast reaches of space. They had to be vigilant and trust no one. Chapter 4: The Battle for the Energy Source. Zoe and her team recovered from the harrowing encounter with the aliens, but the experience left them on high alert. They knew that they couldn't let their guard down, especially now that they were so close to their goal. As they moved deeper into space, they received a transmission from another planet. A friendly planet, it seemed. The message was simple: We have an energy source that you need." Zoe and her team were elated. It felt like the universe was finally on their side. They landed on the planet, optimism in their hearts. But as soon as they stepped out, they realized they had made a terrible mistake. The atmosphere on this planet was toxic, and they had barely survived their hasty landing. To make things worse, the natives of the land were aggressive and began to attack Zoe and her team the moment they stepped out of their ship. Zoe's team fired back, but for every alien they killed, 3 more seemed to take its place. The casualty count started rising, and it seemed that Zoe and her team were losing the battle. But there was no choice. They had come too far to give up now. The team managed to make their way to the energy source mentioned in the transmission. They found a massive gateway, where inside, the energy source was located. But the gate was heavily guarded, and the team was outgunned. The energy source was located at the center of the planet, deep within the planet's core, but the team couldn't afford to spend too long figuring out how to access it. They needed to identify a way inside quickly to acquire the energy source before they were overrun. As Zoe surveyed the situation, it happened. A huge tremor shook the ground, and from the corner of her eye, she spotted a possible situation, a crevice in the far corner of the compound, leading impossibly deep into the planet's rocky crust. With the battle flaring up all around them, Zoe and the team leaped into action. They darted into the crevice, dodging incoming fire from the aliens, and tumbling down the slope that looked like an endpoint for them all. They continued descending vertically, following the pathway of magma, witnessing scenes of such hyperactivity that left Zoe's heart racing. The closer they drew to the energy source, the hotter it grew, the more intense the pressure, and the more complex the situation became. Then, they arrived. They had found the energy source, and it was more magnificent than they had ever dreamt. The energy source was the solution they had been searching for, and Zoe was jubilant. But then they were ambushed. The aliens had followed them down the crevice and arrived en masse, swarming through the tunnels and caverns, intent on taking everything. The aliens overwhelmed the team, and Zoe was suddenly face to face with her own mortality. They fought with fervor, and the battle raged on for what seemed like an eternity. They swung their weapons desperately, trying to survive long enough to escape back to their ship. When the smoke cleared, Zoe and her team had won the battle, but at what cost? Too many had died in that struggle for survival. Zoe was haunted by the memory of what had happened. She had needed the energy source, but it had come at such a great cost. But even as Zoe mourned the losses of her team in the battle for the energy source, she knew that they had come too far to stop. Halfway through their mission, Zoe and her team had to continue their journey, with their sights locked on returning to Earth with the energy source. Chapter 5. The truth revealed. Zoe and her team had finally acquired the energy source they needed to complete their mission. Their journey back to Earth would be long and arduous, but they had the technology to make it happen. As they set a course for home, Zoe couldn't help the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She knew there was more to the situation than they had been led to believe. The energy source was incredible and had given them so much power, but it also left a lot of unanswered questions. What were the aliens after, and why had they agreed to help? Who had sent the transmission to the team, and what was their true purpose? Zoe decided to delve deeper into the mystery. She worked alongside her team, analyzing data and running simulations, determined to uncover the truth. As they studied the records, they discovered something that shocked them. The data showed that the energy source wasn't natural to their world. It had been engineered, created by an intelligent life force that was far more advanced than their own. The implications of this discovery were profound. There were others out there, beings who were capable of manipulating the very fabric of the universe, and Zoe and her team had stumbled upon their creation. But the implications didn't stop there. The data revealed that the energy source wasn't created for peaceful purposes, but to wage war. In the wrong hands, it had the potential to be devastating, a force of mass destruction that could annihilate entire planets. Zoe knew that they had to act fast. The energy source could not be trusted in anyone's hands. She made a decision to destroy the energy source before it could fall into the wrong hands. Her team was hesitant, but Zoe knew it was the right thing to do. As they set up the explosives, they were ambushed, yet again. This time, the enemy was too strong, too powerful. Zoe and her team found themselves in the middle of a firefight, stranded on a planet with no way out, surrounded by an army of aliens who were seeking the energy source. For days, they battled on. Zoe's team fought valiantly, unleashing their full range of battle strategies to stall the enemy, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. The tide of battle turned when one of the team members made a fatal mistake. He triggered a beacon, which drew the enemy's forces in greater numbers, right to them. The team was overwhelmed. In the chaos, Zoe and a few remaining team members were separated from the rest. Trapped and with no way out, they had to make a decision. It was now a race to see who would find them first, their allies, or the aliens who were closing in. Zoe knew that they couldn't hold out much longer. Her heart pounded in her chest as they prepared for one final assault. But then, suddenly, they were saved. Zoe's team saw the glimmer of engines in the sky, and the rescue vessel arrived to extract them. As they blasted away from the planet, Zoe finally had a moment to decompress. Her team was intact, as was their will to fight. But the truth was still out there, waiting to be discovered. And Zoe knew that they couldn't stop until they learned everything there was to know about the energy source and its creators. Chapter 6: The Final Showdown. The team had made it back to Earth, but their mission was far from over. They still had to uncover the truth behind the energy source and its creators. Their research led them to a secret facility, deep beneath the Earth's surface. The facility was heavily guarded, and Zoe and her team had to use all their skills and resources to gain access. As they delved deeper into the facility, they discovered the shocking truth. The creators of the energy source were, in fact, an extraterrestrial race. They had been experimenting with new sources of energy and had used Earth as a test subject. Their tests had been catastrophic, and the effects were visible in the polluted skies and poisoned waters. Zoe's team was horrified. But there was one more revelation to come. The aliens had been watching them, studying their every move. They had been following Zoe and her team since the beginning of their mission, and they wanted the energy source back. But Zoe was not about to give it up. She knew what the aliens were capable of, and she wasn't going to let them unleash destruction on Earth. It was time for the final showdown. Zoe and her team suited up, ready to take on the aliens. The battle was fierce, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the halls of the facility. But Zoe and her team fought with everything they had. In the midst of the battle, Zoe glanced up and caught sight of the energy source. It was in the hands of an alien, being escorted through a secret doorway. Zoe knew that she had to stop them. She rallied her team and charged towards the doorway, determined to prevent the aliens from using the energy source for their nefarious purposes. They emerged into a large, dark room, and in the center stood the alien, holding the energy source aloft. The alien raised its arms, and the energy source began to hum with power. Zoe and her team were paralyzed with astonishment, as the alien spoke in their minds, revealing the ultimate truth. The creators of the energy source were not the aliens, it was humanity itself. The energy source was created to be a new form of weapon, far more powerful than any other weapon known. The aliens had been trying to stop it from being used. The weapon was set to launch and destroy not only the aliens' planet but also Earth itself. Zoe and her team were stunned. They couldn't believe the betrayal they had been subject to all along. It was a sobering moment. It seemed that they themselves were the real threat, not the unknown alien race. But Zoe refused to let the weapon launch. She charged at the alien, ready to tackle him, and the rest of her team joined her in the fight. They used every weapon in their arsenal, fired every shot, and unleashed their deadliest forces. The battle went on for what seemed like hours. In the end, only Zoe and a small handful of her team remained standing. They had managed to save the Earth from certain destruction. As they walked away from the facility, the sun began to rise. It was a new dawn, and Zoe knew that humanity had been given a second chance. They had been taught a powerful lesson. It was time for them to be better, to treat the universe and its inhabitants with respect and to never forget the lessons they had just learned. Chapter 7: New Horizons. Zoe and her team had come full circle. They had started their journey searching for a new source of energy, but along the way, they had been taught a powerful lesson. Humanity had come close to destroying the very thing they were trying to protect. But Zoe wasn't interested in dwelling on the past. She and her team had a new mission. They were going to use their knowledge and experience to create a better world. The Earth was recovering, and it was time for change. Zoe knew that they could make a difference. They were going to create a new society, one that respected the universe and the beings that inhabited it. Zoe founded a new organization, one that prioritized exploration, sustainability, and knowledge. She recruited individuals from all walks of life, each with their own unique skill sets and backgrounds. Together, they began charting unexplored territory, finding new planets to explore and mapping new galaxies. They used their vast knowledge to protect the universe, ensuring that humanity never came close to destroying it again. Their discoveries were vast and complex, and they learned so much about the universe they lived in. Zoe's team also found ways to utilize their new energy source, but they did so carefully, always remaining mindful of the past mistakes. As time passed, Zoe watched her organization grow, expanding into a successful global entity. They had achieved so much, but Zoe knew that their mission was far from over. There was still so much to explore and understand, so much to learn. One day, Zoe and her team stumbled upon an anomaly, deep in space. It was a signal, never detected before, and it was strong and intelligible. Zoe felt a strange sensation as she listened to the transmission. It was calling out, calling for someone to answer its call. Zoe knew that they had to respond. They prepared a vessel and set a course for the source of the signal. They plunged deeper and deeper, marveling at the strange, new worlds they encountered on their journey. When they finally arrived, they discovered something breathtaking. It was an intelligent civilization, living and thriving in ways never known before. Zoe was speechless, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty and intelligence of this new civilization. The civilization welcomed them with open arms, and they shared knowledge and technology with one another. Zoe realized that they had discovered something incredible, something that would change the course of human history forever. As Zoe and her team left the planet, they knew that humanity's journey was far from over. There was so much more to explore and understand, and they were honored to be a part of it. Zoe felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that her team and their organization were making a difference. They were carving out a new future for themselves, one filled with hope, exploration, and a deep respect for the universe they called home.